Hey, it's Soul with another video. These are the sponsors that I'm going to have right above me. And today I wanted to go over all of the predictions that I made about a month ago with regards to what's going to happen after BlizzCon. It's been a month, obviously, so now we're just going to get right into it. Of course, if you enjoy yourself, please like the video and subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. So what I did was make a bunch of predictions, and I gave it a rating of 1 to 5. 1 would be, nah, this isn't really going to happen, and 5 equals to, yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is going to happen to the point where I would bet money, like small amounts of money. All right, so the first prediction. There is going to be an expansion announcement. I gave this one a 5. Yeah, obviously there was a freaking expansion announcement. That was like a really obvious throwaway. All right. Second, I said that there was going to be a mobile Warcraft game. I gave this one a 4. And I was wrong. I was pretty sure that there was, in fact, going to be some sort of mobile announcement for, some sort of an announcement for a WoW pet battle game of some sorts. We got so much news about the kinds of titles that Blizzard has been working on over the past year and some change, so it wouldn't have surprised me if they announced something like this. And I think it would have been safe to announce it during BlizzCon, because Blizzard was also going to announce, wow, Shadowlands, Warcraft 3 Reforged, there was updates on that. So to pile all that stuff in, it would have just equated into a big year for Warcraft. I mean, after all, there's, we're celebrating 15 years of WoW, 25 years of the World of Warcraft, so it would have been a good time to do it. My guess at this point is that they're just not ready to show stuff yet, because Blizzard has been traditionally a very show and tell sort of company. But as for mobile, I don't know, maybe they feel a little bit of hesitation. Perhaps after Diablo Immortal and that little bit of a mess, maybe they're hesitant and they just want to put it out when it's all ready and done and good to go. It would be very different if Blizzard were to go that route, but at this point it's possible. I said that the Shadowlands leak being real, as in like the one with the map, where we saw that map, or when we saw the weird image with the ghost ships and the green looking people. I gave that one a 1. I thought that shit was totally fake, and I was right. Haha! And I'm glad I'm okay, to be frank, I'm glad that it was fake. But I did also say that I also gave it a 4. I gave this one a 4, that we would in fact be going to the Shadowlands next expansion. I gave it a 4, and I was pretty much right. Even if it wouldn't have been like World of Warcraft Shadowlands, I think that it would have been extremely likely that we would visit the Shadowlands somehow, some way. But in this case, it very much is the theme of the expansion. Everything is centered around the Shadowlands. And for all we know, kind of like Warlords of Draenor, it's going to be an expansion that takes place entirely in the Shadowlands. There may not be a story that takes place outside of it, like we've seen in, I guess I'd say Legion, where there's most of the main story takes place over on the Broken Isles, but there are some side quests and stories, and part of the Order Hall campaign takes place in other parts of Azeroth. Is there going to be a Cataclysm-style revamp? I gave this one a 2, that it would be very unlikely that this was going to happen, and I was right. There is no big revamp of that sort going. Pretty much everything, like I said earlier, pretty much everything is going to be taking place within the Shadowlands. Now, it still remains to be seen what's going to happen. If a lot of what happens in the Shadowlands is going to be like the first and the second act, there might be 9.3 might take place back on Azeroth because of reasons, and so even then, I wouldn't expect a big Cataclysm-style revamp to happen in a 0.3 patch. Is there going to be a dance studio? I give this one a 1 for good reason. I don't know why I added that, but obviously there's no dance studio coming. Was there going to be more news on Classic WoW? As in, will they talk about new servers? Will they talk about Classic Plus? I gave this one a 1, and I was right. They hardly said a peep about what's going on with Classic WoW. I mean, they answered some Q&A questions, and they're pretty coy about it. Hey, we want to wait and see. We want to see. We want to check out how things go over time as we get through the phases of Classic WoW, and then basically they're gonna cross that bridge when they get to it. Is there going to be a big class revamp in announced at BlizzCon? I gave this one a 5. I was really confident that there was going to be a huge class revamp, that the wheel would be broken and rebuilt for the sake of World of Warcraft's future. And I was wrong. There is no big class revamp, but there is a little class revamp. I at least want to try to kind of make this argument that with what they're doing with unpruning abilities, Blizzard is pivoting towards a paradigm of celebrating class as opposed to spec. I can go on for a while about what Blizzard did in the past and what's led up to today, but this is what we're going with right now. Right now we're at a point where abilities are being unpruned. Abilities are being not spec specific, but they're going to be class wide, which I think is great. So this sets the stage for later growth. Unfortunately, there are things that I wanted to have happen that didn't, such as the talent tree being just gutted and rebuilt and everything. But between the new level revamp and that sort of experience, which is going to be a very big change, in my opinion, for players who are leveling new characters, whether you're a veteran or if you're a brand new player, it is going to feel different. The leveling experience will feel a bit more fulfilling. It's just not what I was looking for. So there was a bit of a class revamp, but not the big one that I was hoping for. Is there going to be a new class announced at BlizzCon? I gave this one a 4. I was fairly confident that there's going to be a new class, but I was a little bit doubtful because, well, there are reasons that maybe there shouldn't be a new class in the new expansion. And, well, I was wrong. There was no new class. I was like, oh, well, okay. I was actually pretty surprised that there wasn't a new class, but it makes sense too, especially now that we know what the Shadowlands is. There were a lot of votes for, oh, well, of course, with the Shadowlands, we're going to get Dark Rangers, Necromancers of that sort. But in the context of the Shadowlands, I guess the new class didn't really make sense because the Dark Ranger and the Necromancer, they only represent one of the covenants when there are others. There's one that applies to nature. There's one that applies to like the Valkyr, or, it has a very paladin-esque kind of feel to it with the Kyrian, which we experienced in the demo. So to have a class like that, it would feel pretty limiting unless we had a situation where, okay, we have some super undead necromancer-like person who had the powers of all 4 covenants, which might be cool. That could be one thing, but Blizzard decided to not go that route, and I don't have a whole lot of. I ain't mad about it. It just kind of sucks that between there not being a class and the revamp, this big class revamp not being as big as we thought it would be, it feels like Blizzard isn't putting enough work into that side of things. But I could be wrong. There's so little that we know about all the class changes that are going to happen. We know that there aren't going to be huge changes incoming. They want to try to preserve them as much as they can, but with this paradigm shift, we'll just have to see if it's going to be as meaningful as we hope it is. And from that, are we going to feel the... is there going to be a big hole with there not being a new class? In my opinion, no. But this is coming from the perspective of someone who only cares to play one character anyway. Is there going to be player housing announced at BlizzCon? I gave this one a 2. I should have gave this one a 1 because... yeah, but I gave it a 2 because of hope, and I was right. There is no player housing announced in Shadowlands, and it makes sense. Welcome to the Shadowlands. Build your house. Why? Wait, why? Imagine if the Shadowlands story was you get killed, and then you end up in the Shadowlands. Okay, that's your way of getting in. You get killed, and then you're kind of stuck there. It's like, okay, you might as well get yourself situated. Settle in, bro, you're dead, and then build a house. That would have made a little bit more sense, but clearly not. So no player housing, bummer. I asked, someone had asked a question about player housing And ultimately, they said that, just like many other things, it's all about the story. The story is what's going to lead to features that make sense. They don't want to just tack something on and be like, okay, this will be great. Although Island Expeditions, I would say, are kind of like a little bit weird. But in the context of Shadowlands, housing just wouldn't make sense, unfortunately. My hope is that the next expansion will bring us something new and awesome and sweet. Is there going to be a faction disruption in the next expansion? As in, are we going to see like the dissolving of factions, or are we going to see instances where Horde and Alliance players can party together and do stuff together, raid, do dungeons, and so on and so forth? I gave this one a 2. And I was right. There is going to be no big disruption here. And again, the story is leading to this. It's kind of like Legion, where if you recall, at the start of Legion, the Horde and Alliance, they went in kind of separately. They assaulted the Broken Shore, and they broke against the wall of Legion stuff. And so it was left to the class orders to handle everything. And they did. Well, from the class orders to the armies of Legion Fall to the whatever the heck factions it was that assaulted Argus, they did the job. It wasn't really much of the factions that were going on. I mean, heck, the only involvement that they really had was in Stormheim, when it was the Forsaken versus the Worgen for the most part. So in the case of Shadowlands, right now we're going back to a sort of united front where, yeah, the factions are being blurred, but they're not going to be partying together or anything like that. It's going to be focused on the covenants. These covenants are going to be fighting, are going to be working to restore themselves to their former glory and repair the machine that is the Shadowlands. And in this case, the faction lines get blurred a little bit. People from opposite factions or even different classes, they can all join like this same covenant. So it'll be cool seeing. This is an instance where the roleplay of it isn't as jarring as it is with Legion. So recall in Legion, if I'm a paladin, I'm the fucking boss. I'm the High Lord of the Silver Hand, but I'm walking around and I'm seeing a whole bunch of other High Lords of the Silver Hand walking around. All of us have Ashbringers and other such things. In the case of the Covenants, though, we're just bonding together between different people that really want this transmog, or really want this ability, or really want to team up and explore the story of this particular Covenant. But we're not special. At least I don't think. At least I'm not sure yet. We're not entirely special. We're not the leader. We're not, we don't have a certain title to ourselves. Not that we know of yet. I think the Soulbinds are what's going to kind of muck that up a little bit, but that remains to be seen. Is Blizzard going to change how allied races work? I gave this one a 3, and I don't think they really answered this. It appears that, well, one, we don't know what the new allied races are yet, if there's going to be any in Shadowlands. And from that, so obviously, we don't know. But as for the current lot of allied races, there doesn't appear to be any change with that going on right now. At least during BlizzCon, they were a little bit coy about talking about allied race change or allied race requirements, but I guess it's too early to say. Is Sylvanas going to die mid-expansion, or at least is there a strong indication that she's going to die mid-expansion? I give this one a 5, and of course, we're not there yet, so I can't really say whether it is or is not going to happen. Now, it does appear that Sylvanas is going to be very central to what's going on in this expansion. I mean, obviously, she caused everything that's going on, but there's a lot to consider here. I mean, she's working with, at least we think that she's working with the jailer. She obviously has jailer powers. We see her demonstrate that when she is fighting the Lich King and basically trucking him. But as for whether or not she's going to die, it's a little bit hard to say. Is she going to be like the Gul'dan of Shadowlands? Is she going to be like the end boss? I'm going to stand by this now. like 2 years early, and I'm gonna say that Sylvanas is eventually going to take the place of the jailer or the arbiter or some high level of position in the Shadowlands, or at least one of those two positions in the Shadowlands, that will in fact make her a master of death, but at the same time kind of like keep her locked in place. So she's gonna write herself out of the story, but she's not going to exactly die as much as many would want her to, but she's not really going to be like part of the story anymore. That's just a guess of mine. Is Pathfinder going to change, or is there going to be some sort of announcement that indicates that Pathfinder requirements are going to change in the next expansion? I give this one a 3, and so far, yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to change. Ian and many others have said that the Pathfinder requirements are basically going to be the same thing as it was before. Now, I remember I did ask a very specific question on how it could be unlocked a little bit differently. I suggested during one of these interviews, I was like, hey, maybe we can have something where if you max out a covenant in a certain zone, that covenant will be like, hey, cool, we'll let you fly around this zone. So you at least get one zone where you can fly around because you happen to max out everything with that covenant. And then maybe later on you can somehow unlock flying in any of these other zones. But it doesn't seem like they're going to be going that route so far. Maybe if we just keep giving lots and lots of feedback, aka bitching, maybe we can get that sort of change to happen. But at least right now, nope. Is there going to be any announcement that the displaced races will be relocated, as in the Night Elves or the Forsaken or the Worgen? And so far, well, I gave this one a 4, but so far there's no indication of that. We're not seeing that there's going to be like, hey, they built a new capital, or the Worgen are going to repopulate Gilneas or anything like that. But I think that's a little bit too soon to tell. Something like that isn't exactly what you would call, hey, look, we definitely need to have this in the features trailer, guys. We got to say that, yay, you know, these races are moving back into their old capitals. And yeah, but it does nothing effectively. You know, it has nothing to do with the actual Shadowlands expansion. It's just kind of a nice little freebie. So for them to not say anything at this point, that doesn't surprise me. Is there going to be a new feature added into the expansion that is, quote, good? I worded this funny. Is there going to be a good surprise feature in the new expansion announced at BlizzCon? I gave this one a 2, and I guess I was being pretty cynical about it at this point. I was like, okay, you know, after the delivery of Island Expeditions, which I didn't like very much, and Warfront, which I did like a little bit more, but, you know, it didn't turn out to be like as awesome as I hoped it would. I was like, you know, we'll see what they do. But I was wrong. At least so far, I think I was wrong. I gave this one a 2, but they're introducing Torghast, the infinite roguelike dungeon in Shadowlands, and I'm fucking stoked over it. This is the thing that's got me like really excited about the expansion, because it's an endless dungeon. It's something that you jump into, and that seems to have like lots of things that you want to farm for, whether it's cosmetics, whether it's materials to create items or create legendary items. And it's something that you can solo, or you can have a small group with you. And when you have a small group with you, the kinds, the covenants that you team up with matter, which is like a double-edged sword, because then you'll be like, okay, I gotta get this person, you know, this covenant person here, because their covenant ability will let us get past an obstacle, or having this other covenant, it will make a door open or something like that. Like this was described in interviews that we did. But the fact that the fact that it's endless and that there's continually things to farm for, it almost feels like it's another pillar of endgame content, which I find really cool. Because I'm not too big on dungeons, like the monotony of dungeons. You know, I do raid, of course, and I do like little bits of PvP here. So I'll be interested in trying this out and seeing if this is something that fits my style as a player in the context of an MMO. Now, it might fall flat on its face, and it might turn out to not be something that I enjoy doing, despite me having big talk about it. But does this excite me? Do I think this is good so far? Yeah, I think this is like I think that this is cool. Yeah, and it's not timed. That's a huge thing for me. So it'll be cool having that sort of feel of, okay, whew, I got through this pack. Let me take some time, eat up, rest, throw down some food buffs and all that stuff, and so that we can get through the next pack together or something like that. So it has that kind of feel. It's a dungeon crawl, and I think that's really neat if you have the time for it. If you don't have the time for it, well, that's what Mythic Plus is for. You know, having additional options like that is incredible. And when it comes to like feedback from Battle for Azeroth, when we're left with things that are on a timer, whether it's islands, which are on a timer of sorts, Mythic Plus, which is obviously on a timer, it leaves much less room to simply explore and try things out, and otherwise take your time. So something like this, yeah, really looking forward to it. Are Warfronts and Island Expeditions going to have a future in the next expansion? I gave this one a 2. I doubt it, and it turns out that I'm right. Warfronts and Island Expeditions are going to be features that stick with BFA. They lived and they die there. Now, as for the technology, that remains to be seen. There is some cool stuff that comes out of Warfronts and Island Expeditions that could possibly be incorporated into future content, whether it's something that Blizzard hasn't announced for Shadowlands or something that's going to come in patch 9.1, 9.2, or other such things. It does kind of suck that things didn't work out the way they did. Although in my opinion, there were some pretty fundamental flaws about most notably Island Expeditions that made them not as enjoyable as they could have been. Same goes with Warfronts. Like, if they had heroic Warfronts from the start, I think people would have enjoyed that a lot more. In my opinion, the Dark Shore Warfronts especially was disappointing from a urgency standpoint. It just felt like you just pushed to the end and that was it. Whereas the Arathi Warfront had, you know, a little bit of a sense of urgency there. It remains to be seen though. We still need to experience the Dark Shore Warfront, and that, for all I know, might be like the most fun thing ever. So we'll have to see. Is artifact power still going to be a thing? I gave this one a 3. I wasn't sure, and well, it's kind of not, but it kind of is. Now, when we're talking about artifact power, we're talking about an infinite thing, like an infinite progression system that you're constantly chasing for, coupled with a mathematical catch-up system to keep players in line together. That doesn't seem to be following us into Shadowlands, but there is going to be progression that takes place after max level, or in the case of alts, you can start progressing through it right away, and this is through the Covenant and the Soulbind system, which we don't have a whole lot of information about, except for the fact that you can work towards farming a certain resource called Anima in order to progress through this Soulbind tree. You're going to be working closely with certain characters to improve your Soulbinds. You'll be able to slot them, change them around as if they're like a separate talent system, and that kind of sounds fun, but it also doesn't seem to involve this whole infinite farming sort of dealy either. There isn't going to be a single item that you're going to have slotted or stuck in your inventory that you're going to keep powering up over and over again. Are class sets and bonuses going to return in the next expansion? I gave this one a 4. I thought it was pretty likely, and it turns out that, well, they kind of are. Now, set bonuses, not so much, and I agree with Blizzard on this point, that class set bonuses that there were certain things about the system that was cumbersome, so to be frank, I'm glad they're not making a return. But when it comes to the cosmetic side of things, class sets are going to come back. We are going back to a time, back to the old days when we're going to see, basically the Shadowlands version of a paladin, a priest, a warlock, a death knight, a everything. So we're going back to that sort of theme. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what sorts of renditions that they have this time around. Is Titan Forging going to stay in Shadowlands. I gave this one a 4, but then a couple weeks later, the 8.3 PTR came out, and well, that totally killed hope for this. Now that said, Blizzard didn't outright say that Titan Forging wasn't going to come back. We do know that with this new fangled system that's coming in 8.3 with corruption as a stat that replaces Titan Forging, it doesn't exactly mean that Titan Forging won't come back somehow, some way in the next expansion. It just feels like at this point it's very unlikely. It's just a matter of seeing how players take this new system in 8.3 that could possibly have some influence on how itemization is going to go in the future. But there also seems to be just overall a lot more agency over itemization through crafting, whether it is profession crafting in Shadowlands or whether it's making legendaries. There just seems to be a lot more that we can do. So in the sense of Titan Forging, it may or may not be needed because there are going to be additional systems of control that players will be able to take advantage of that will hopefully overcome that need or that compelling need for luck. Is forced personal loot going to stick around in the next expansion? I gave this one a 2. I was pretty confident that the overall feedback about forced personal loot was going to cause it to kind of be loosened up or to go away. But unfortunately, they dodged the question. This is one of the questions that were asked throughout some of the many interviews, and they weren't quite ready to talk about it. They said that they're getting feedback and they're going to incorporate that feedback into whatever they implement next, but they didn't outright say that yes, things are in fact going to change or not change. We're just gonna have to cross our fingers and hold our breath for an update later. Is the expansion going to come out fall of 2020? I gave this one a 5. Because at this point, expansion launches feel like clockwork at this point. We have a pretty clear kind of schedule as to when things are coming out. We have a pretty good cadence of content, even though some people may or may not be happy with what actually comes. But so far, the only indication that we have is that, and it's thanks to the pre-order screen that we're already seeing, that the expansion is going to come out no later than the end of the year, 2020. But that's a ballpark, of course. That's going to serve as like the absolute ceiling, the limit. It can't come out after that date legally, I suppose, because of the way pre-orders work. But they didn't say whether it will or not. I'm still gonna hold on to fall 2020, just like many other expansions have been coming out lately. The last prediction I'm going to do separate from stream. It was a prediction that patch 8.3 was going to come out in early 2020. I had guessed a 4, and I am definitely right because of some very recent developments. We just got an announcement that patch 8.3 is in fact going to come out early January, as opposed to late December, which had happened in patch 8.1 right before the start of the Battle for Desire lore. This is something that I've been predicting for a couple of months now, given the feedback from patch 8.1. People didn't like having to wait all throughout the holidays between the content or the small bits of content that we got from that patch, all the way leading up to the launch of the actual raid. On the other hand, it is kind of a bummer that we're going to be waiting just a little bit longer for patch 8.3 to launch in 2020, and I'm going to be guessing within the first 2 weeks or so of January. This actually relates pretty closely to my previous prediction that the expansion is going to launch around the fall time as usual. There was a legal date that it's going to launch before December, but for the same reason that patch 8.3 is going to launch in early January. Well, that's a big reason why the expansion should not launch in December for that reason. And of course, it's not going to launch after that. It's going to launch before that, probably before BlizzCon most likely. And that's going to be about that. If you didn't notice earlier that this was a stream that was being recorded and ripped out, so I appreciate you watching. And I would love for you to like the video if you enjoyed yourself, and of course to subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you for the next thing that I do, but until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.